those who perpetuate violence and hatred. These acts are designed to cause disruption, engender fear, and stop us from participating in Jewish life. The best thing we can do is to be strong and to continue to show up and participate. We cannot let outside forces deter us from honoring our Jewish practice and traditions. As we have realized a very significant rise in anti-Semitism, our Federation launched Rock Strong about 4 years ago to help our Jewish community create a culture of safety and security and to raise resources to keep our community safe. Rock Strong has raised millions of dollars for this important effort, and we continue to raise funds for this important initiative. And like I said, sadly, this is something that we've had to do. I want to thank Mark Henderson, our Director of Jewish Community Security, for always having our back and for responding swiftly and effectively in partnership with our local synagogues in response to these incidents, which you'll hear a little bit more in a moment. Our Jewish community represents only 1% of the regional population in the Rochester area. We are a tiny minority that has needed to invest millions of dollars in our safety and security because of the steep and rapid rise in anti-Semitism. The threat to us is real, and sadly this weekend was a stark reminder of this reality. I want you to remember that a threat against any minority is a threat against all of us. The problem of anti-Semitism and the threat of violence against the Jewish people must not only be a problem of the Jewish people and our Jewish community, it's a problem for all of us, and I ask everybody to take this threat seriously, and I thank you for coming and participating this morning as we talk a little bit more about these incidents. Thank you.
So we'll do questions at the end, if you're good with that, unless you have questions for Meredith. So on Friday evening, the start of the Jewish holidays, we anticipated post-pandemic a very large in-person crowd. And leading up to the high holidays, we've worked with our locations on a review of security procedures and protocols. The Federation has established a grant fund so that additional security measures could be taken. So we worked with our congregations, we worked with law enforcement, we had special attentions assigned with a number of police agencies. And then I got a call Friday night that at the start of services, an individual, during the holidays, a house of worship, whether it's the high holidays in the Jewish community or a traditional service, whether it's in a church or a mosque, the doors are open and welcoming to anybody that wants to attend services. So on Friday evening, an individual walked in, greeters greeted him. There was something about him that didn't seem right, and so it was noted. The security personnel who were working noted that the individual, yes, he appeared to be wanting to come to the services, but there was just something, so security positioned themselves, and right at the start of service, and Rabbi Stein will talk about that, as Rabbi Stein was making some comments and welcoming the large crowd that was in attendance, this individual stood up and started making comments. And he talked about hell, and he talked about the devil, and it was clear that it was disruptive. It was clear that the intent of the individual was to disrupt, and I'll have to let Chief Cathaldi talk about possible criminal charges relative to that. The security that was there as part of the protocol for the high holidays immediately took the individual into custody and removed him from the service, and then it was from that point on that the Brighton Police Department handled the investigation. And then I can tell you, when I did site visits on Saturday, not only on Shabbat, on Rosh Hashanah, there was an undertone of concern with the congregation, Temple B'rith Kodesh. Thank you to the Brighton Police Department for having a visual and reassuring presence. And I can tell you, I heard from a number of people that were in attendance that night how disturbing that was for them. So without further ado, Rabbi, would you like to explain your perspective to the media?
Thank you, Mark. And once again, I'm Rabbi Stein. I'm the senior rabbi at Temple B'rith Kodesh. And I want to begin just with a word of thanks to Mark and the Federation leadership, to Chief Cathaldi and the Brighton Police Department, and to the security officers who were on duty. So Mark has shared a little bit about what happened Friday evening. It was just a few minutes into our evening service at the beginning of this holy day, and this individual stood up acting in a very erratic fashion, speaking in a way that was clear was not healthy, was not there for a positive reason, and there was a lot of fear and a lot of confusion. And as Mark said, very quickly the security guards were wonderful. They were able to take the man from the sanctuary very quickly, very quietly, and then I was able to sort of quiet the congregation and reset and invited people to come back in. There were a number of people who had ducked and ran out of the sanctuary, and we were able to resume the service. So part of what I'm feeling today is that it really is important for us to say that we're not deterred, that we are going to continue our gatherings and our observances. We have really robust security in place. It's a sad reality of our time, the combination of private security and the police department and what Federation is able to do with us and for us. And in that sense, everything worked really beautifully. It was scary, it was disconcerting. People stayed that evening. People came the next morning in significant numbers, and I think that's very, very important. And that's just a little bit about sort of what happened, the mood in the room. And I know Chief Cathaldi is going to share a little bit from his perspective, and I'll be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability as well. So, Chief, do you want to share a little bit more?
Thank you, Rabbi. I just want to echo what the rabbi said. You know, I think the security staff that was there and the members of the police department that came out immediately. I've watched the video. It was described to me, but then watching the video and seeing the reaction of the rabbi and seeing the reaction of the congregants, it was really alarming. We've identified this individual. There's a couple more investigative steps I want to take before we go any further with it, and I hope to have an update on his status soon. Questions? We're going to do it at the
So
end.
why don't we address TBK? Rabbi, you want to come back up?
Yeah.
For questions that you may have relative to what happened Friday.
Rabbi, excuse me for a second. What was it about this person that didn't seem right, that raised red flags when he walked into Temple?
So I think there were a couple of moments where we were observing him. We have volunteer greeters who were at the door of the sanctuary, and they've received training from Mark, and we'll talk about that. And then I also noticed him before the service as well. I think, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there was something about the way that he was sort of walking through the crowd without engaging, that he was, I would almost say, sort of just in his own head. And you know, there are shy people, there are people who want to stay to themselves, but there's something about his mannerism that just seemed off. And it was really a gut feeling as much as anything, which is why I think it triggered this chain reaction where the security guard was probably no more than 10 or 12 feet away from him as we began the service that evening.
So I can address that. There's a training platform called the Power of Hello. Okay, we're opening and welcoming. And it starts with a conversation of hello, welcome to services. And from that point on, there are indicators in body language. There's indicators in a failure to make eye contact. And if there's anything that starts to happen from that point, your security team, your greeter team interfaced, and they were able to say, okay, we're going to welcome the individual into service. It's noted the behavior, the concerns with the behavior, and, you know, had the intent been just somebody that never attended a service before, you would expect some body language, but this escalated. And again, I use terms in my old job, escalation, de-escalation. It clearly escalated. There was no opportunity for de-escalation, and that's why security acted in a very appropriate manner, in my opinion.
Chief, at this point, do you think that he was just solo, or do you think he's tied to any other larger organization?
From what we know right now, it was just solo. You know, and the security staff, like they were saying, when they saw him, they were within pretty close distance because felt something was off with him, and they didn't want him to get, they wanted to stay close to him. But I think he's just solo at this time.
Chief, do you know who this person is?
We've positively identified him. We know who he is.
Did you know him in the past? Have you had encounters?
He's had prior law enforcement contacts.
Anything to do with threats against the Jewish community?
I don't want to comment on that right now. He has had prior law enforcement contacts.
Chief, were there threats made, or were
I think it was.
the community or not?
No, I think it was just threatening behavior. Yeah, I mean, in a church setting or synagogue setting, when it was really quiet, and you stand up in the middle of this setting and you start rambling loudly, it just really caused concern. And in the environment that we live in today, see something, say something, run, hide, fight training, I think they did the right thing. I saw people start making their way towards the exit. The rabbi did a good job in keeping people calm. You certainly don't want to cause a mass exodus where people are going to get hurt trying to stampede out the door. So I think it was handled appropriately. I mean, there'll be plenty of time to look back at it and review it later.
So I looked at the response from not being in law enforcement, being part of the training team, right? We're just coming off of the trial, the verdict, the death sentence, and what happened at Tree of Life. And that resonates, as the high holidays were coming up, there's a national organization called Secure Community Network. They offered a series of webinars, and basically it was designed, let's be prepared for the high holidays. Let's be prepared if something like this comes to our synagogue. And as a result of this training, as a result of having adequate security staff on site, what I viewed, and I know the video is not for public view right now, and that's because it's part of evidence that will be used in court. I clearly saw somebody who had intent to disrupt a service, and somebody that had intent to disrupt service at the holiest time in a Jewish location. To me, an outsider, his intent was clear. His intent by going to Temple B'rith Kodesh on that day was clear. As to, we're talking, differentiating about threats and physical threats, let's focus on the disruption and the undertone of concern that sends to the congregation and to the rabbi. So moving forward, we'll look at security enhancements. Currently, what we're doing right now this week, I believed prior to the holidays we had a really good plan for security posture. We'll enhance it. I appreciate the interface with law enforcement at all levels, including the FBI. That's more about the second part we're going to talk about. But, it's very disconcerting to what I viewed, and I think once the video becomes public and you can view it for yourself, you will agree with me that the intentions of this individual was to stop your service.
I want to second that last part of what Mark said and share one other thought, which is, it was very clear this man did this very deliberately. He chose the holy day. He came in, didn't do anything sort of before the service began, didn't do anything in the foyer, in the lobby, waited until we had begun the worship service, and then he sort of seized that moment to stand up in the center of our sanctuary. So there's no doubt in my mind that he was there for bad purposes, for disruption, and we're just thankful that things resolved peacefully. The fear element is very significant, but it did resolve peacefully. The other comment I want to make, earlier I thanked the Federation and all that they've done with Rock Strong, that security is such an obligation or a burden on the congregation, all the synagogues in town at this point in time. The most meaningful moment of the last 72 hours, in addition to the reach out from Mark and the reach out from Chief Cathaldi, were the messages I got from friends in the Christian community. Pastors who called me on Saturday morning to say, we heard what happened, we're holding you in our prayers, we're here to support you. And those relationships are really so critically important. When we build those relationships across lines of difference, we can support one another. We can celebrate together, but we can also support one another at difficult times. So I want to offer that word of gratitude to my friends, my colleagues in the Christian community, and encourage everybody in the community who has relationships or connections to reach out, whether it's to one of the synagogues or to other Jewish organizations. We really, really value those connections and partnerships.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi, we are in a time right now where anti-Semitic sentiments have become more and more mainstream. We're seeing it more and more pretty much every month it seems to increase. And I don't want to ask just like a simple question of how does it feel for you, but seeing the context of everything that's been happening in the world around that, and then having this happen, how does it feel? How does it feel for you and your congregation?
There is no doubt that it is scary. I will not deny or minimize that emotion. It is very scary. I think everybody's mind on Friday night when this began was sort of putting it in that broader context of the tragic anti-Semitism and violence that we've experienced. There's also incredible resolve that we're part of a very long history, very long chain of tradition, and we're going to work with the experts. We're going to work with those who take good care of us and keep us safe. And our full sanctuary on Saturday morning, the morning afterwards, is evidence of that. Our full service on Sunday, on the second day of the holiday, is evidence of that. And I have no doubt that people will keep saying, we're not going to be deterred. We're going to keep being proud in our religious identity and in our religious practices.
Mr. Henderson, you had mentioned the recent investment, right, in security efforts. So could you kind of describe the discussions that were based off of that need and how those efforts could change going forward from this?
So I am entering year 4 in this role as an advisor to the Rochester Jewish community. And one of the very early tasks that we did, although the Jewish community counts for 1%, there's 25 locations that we have to look at that have unique and individual specific needs. I can tell you, TBK for short, has always had a very good security posture. They've had, very good security measures in place. As I train countering active threat, it's unfortunate, and the children in schools have to practice lockdown. Well, if you go to a church, you go to a synagogue, we also talk about situational awareness, and if a threat were to bypass security and it comes in, there are some countermeasures. So I can tell you from a security perspective, TBK has very great access control measures. They have a number of other features that I think are top-notch in the security world. But when you have a service, you welcome people in. And that's what happened that day, right? So, I've been invited to meet with the leadership of the synagogue to talk about what we can learn from what happened this past weekend, what we can bring to other measures and other aspects of the community. I think we're in a good place. It's unfortunate that we have to look at security measures at a place of worship, but we do. And hopefully that answers your question. Okay, good? Okay.
No, sorry. One last thing. Rabbi, Yom Kippur starts Sunday. Are you concerned?
So yes, the next holy day is Yom Kippur, which will be Sunday night and Monday, and I am not concerned because we have great measures in place, and we're spending these days this week doing an evaluation, seeing if there's anything we can improve. But the great partnership between the Federation, the Rock Strong effort, the police department. At yesterday's service, the New York State Police had a car that was offering a presence as well. I think we're doing everything we can, and it'll be a safe and special holiday.
So, unfortunately, yesterday, a number of locations, as I mentioned, there are 2 here in the Rochester area, received email bomb threats. The bomb threats were specific to the Jewish community. And I'll call up Rabbi Lansfeld from Geneva in a moment to talk about what that meant for her in Geneva. I can tell you that there were a series of these threats that were received specifically targeting, and I'll use the word targeting, the Jewish community, because that was some of the verbiage contained. And as a result of that, it caused great concern and alarm to those that received the emails. So prior to the high holidays, there was a concern, there was a series of incidents that were occurring across the country where during Shabbat services, Saturday services, locations were somebody was calling in or communicating that there was a bomb placed and it caused mass evacuation. There have also been incidents around the country specifically targeting Jewish locations about swatting, and where an active threat is going on, and then that causes a full police response. So prior to this weekend, we had not experienced any of them in the Rochester area. We talked about leadership to review policies, procedures, plans relative to bomb threats. And Rabbi, if you want to talk about Geneva, and you can tell about what happened yesterday and how that was resolved.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rabbi Ann Landau from Temple Bethel in Geneva. We had our major celebration on Saturday, and it was wonderful. We had a full sanctuary, and we knew every person who was in the building, so we felt pretty confident that the building was safe and secure. Early Sunday morning, I was preparing for our service on Sunday, which was going to be smaller and primarily on Zoom anyway. And I saw this email come up, which stated that there was a bomb threat and that many bombs had been planted in our building, which, as I said, I felt was kind of improbable. The wording of the bomb threat seemed like a hoax, but it was very scary because it talked about, there'll be people lying in a pool of blood, and so it was sort of graphic to alarm you, but it also seemed like a hoax. But of course, you have to take things like that seriously. And first, I contacted the Greater Rochester Board of Rabbis to see if anyone else had received a similar email. And Rabbi Debbie Till from Temple Sinai said, "Have you been in touch with Mark Henderson?" So I had not. And fortunately, Mark interrupted his golf game, came in his shorts.
We're going to get real specific, Rabbi.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Came running over to the temple. I also called the Geneva police, who were amazing. They came to my house. They tolerated my barking dog. They immediately, put their, protocols into action. They identified a canine team with a bomb-sniffing dog. They were amazing. Everyone was really so incredibly helpful. The worst part of the whole thing was that across from the temple is the Abbey Center for Jewish Life at Hobart and William Smith colleges. And sort of for an abundance of caution, because it also has the name Jewish Center in it, which is part of what the threat was, the Abbey Center had to be evacuated. And college students, 9:30 in the morning, that's early. It was very, very upsetting. Students were crying. They became agitated. The house manager, unfortunately, felt she had to remove the sign that was saying it was a Jewish cultural center. But once again, Hobart and William Smith College's security, President Mark Guerin, his wife Mary, the pastor came, and just as Rabbi Stein had mentioned, everyone in the community reached out and sent emails or called to say how much they supported us, and we really we felt very blessed.
So can we clarify that it was a very early in the morning golf thing that occurred yesterday?
Yes,
So-
I was checking my email it was around 6 in the morning. It was around 6 in the morning.
I use flashlights. So one of the points that we want to talk about, yes, the language that was received by Geneva, and we'll talk to Exheim as well, it matches word for word. And as to whether there's a scale of how you can determine the veracity or the truthfulness, or whether it's a legitimate threat or not, you have to take in a number of factors, right? So one of our first conversations was we need to involve law enforcement. law enforcement was involved. Law enforcement made a decision based on their policy and procedure, how they would handle the initial call. They did that, right? And then from that, I can tell you when the students who were residing in that Hobart Abbey Center home, when they were asked to leave, it was very impactful on them. I saw terror, unknown. So, you know, our goal here is to talk about the impact that it had. And it's important to note that your services were not stopped.
Absolutely.
They carried on.
We had a great service later that morning, and we did it entirely on Zoom just because the building was still being checked. But the police offered to stay, and we could do the service later. But you know, we didn't do it on Zoom out of fear. It was just more out of practicality. So.
All right. Any questions for Geneva? Okay. Thanks, Rabbi.
Okay.
And very early in the morning golf turn. Sorry about that. Rabbi? Ray, you want to come up from, and Pastor, why don't you come up as well? So I'll step out. I'll frame it as you're coming up.
Okay.
So as the Geneva incident was being investigated, I got a call from Ray Monchkin from Congregation at Time. They share space with a church, and I'll let them explain that in Perrington. And then a decision was made by the law enforcement entity after receiving the information from Congregation at Time. The Monroe County Sheriff's Office responded to the church, and you can talk about the impact and the evacuation. Again, policy and procedure. You got to look at the threat that was made, and there's a term, out of abundance of caution, you have to follow your policy and procedure. And I can tell you a number of years ago, we had that at the JCC, and there's 200,000 square feet, and as a police chief, it made the decision we're not going to open it until it's declared safe, and it took 4 hours to declare it safe. So, you know, I'm not second guessing law enforcement response. I thought it was appropriate and adequate. So why don't you talk about yesterday?
Okay. I'm David Abrahams, and I am the rabbi at Congregation at Chaim, and I'm very grateful to Ray Monshine, who is a board member who actually predates me at Etz Chaim, and I'm in my 25th year serving the congregation. So, but Ray has been, from the time we started Rock Strong, has been working very closely with Federation, with Mark, and the procedures that we've put in place worked. Our admin got the email early in the morning, and since he lives in Canandaigua, he notified Canandaigua Police. The Monroe Sheriff's Department was notified. I'll let Ray give you more details on that.
Again, just for deference, we're not getting too specific because it's still an open investigation.
Exactly, exactly. But we recently out in Perrington had incidents where Church of the Resurrection was a victim of vandalism. And our community of pastors and rabbi, our community of churches and synagogues came together to make sure that everybody understood that an attack on one house of worship is an attack on all of them. When I was growing up, the words from Isaiah were on my home synagogue, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. And this is really true where we worship at Mountain Rise, where Reverend Springer is the one whose services were disrupted. We were targeted, but they were affected. Anti-Semitism does not just affect Jews, it affects everybody. And it spreads like a cancer. And it has been growing for a while, but we're not going to back down from it. We are so grateful to have the procedures in place, and as a community to have the resources in place so that come next Sunday night and Monday morning, we can walk into the sanctuary at Mountain Rise and conduct our services and experience the renewal that this holiday is supposed to represent. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Ray to talk specifically about the response. And again, to tell Reverend Springer that we were targeted, you were affected. And we are just, I'm just really angry about the fact that 2 faith communities were affected by this, by whoever is behind this, this email threat. And appreciate the fact that so many law enforcement agencies are working to find out who did it and how to stop it. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Raymond Shine, I'm president of the Board of Trustees at Etzchaim. When I received the call from our administrator, I immediately, and the email he forwarded to me, I immediately called Mark Henderson, who advised me next steps. And he wanted me to contact the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, which I did. By the way, I called the office, and they said call 911 so I could dispatch officers immediately, and they did. I got phone calls by multiple officers immediately, and they did go to the church. They got there before I did because I'm 23 miles away. They were there immediately. And the key thing there is call 911. That's your first point. So I got there, and they had the whole team there, many cars, many police, the K-9 unit, and they were all ready in process. They had cleared the building. The Reverend can speak to that. Fortunately, I think you were about done with service at that time, but everybody was calm, well functioning, and it was a very quick response. I got that notification, and I took it very seriously. I said, you just don't know. You have to take it seriously, which is what MCSO does. They take every threat like that as a potential real threat, and they responded beautifully. I have to commend them for that. But,
Okay, well, we have the...
Yep.
I'm Kelly Sprinkle, the intentional interim minister at Mountain Rise United Church of Christ. Let me begin by saying that Mountain Rise United Church of Christ and the denomination, the United Church of Christ as a whole, stand in solidarity with the Jewish community and support them, and we are grateful for their presence. On behalf of Mountain Rise, we consider Etzchaim our honored friends and guests. We have had a long relationship with them. Our worship service had just concluded yesterday. A deputy from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department approaches me saying there had been a threat and that we should evacuate the building. And we evacuated the building orderly and left the building at that time. For our congregation members, as they found out, they were saddened that such events happened and stood especially sorrowful for the Jewish community, Etzchaim, our friends, and we remain saddened that these type of events happen in the world. Mountain Rise United Church of Christ is an open and affirming congregation that has an extravagant welcome and welcomes everyone to our building and into our facility and into our lives. And again, we are grateful that Etzchaim is one of our honored friends and guests in the building.
Okay. Any questions about yesterday? Okay.
Chief, or Mark, were the emails identical?
So the verbiage was identical. I can't get too specific because it is an open investigation handled by multiple levels of law enforcement, including the New York State Police Hate Crimes Task Force and the FBI. The verbiage was identical. The sender, there were 4 specific senders that have been attached to this, and again, I've been asked not to give real specifics, but I can tell you it's an open and active investigation, and if the source that distributed these emails is located, there's both state and federal implications.
Is the source from the United States?
So I'm not really good with my computer, Control-Alt-Delete. I really don't know where the IP addresses originated from, but I can tell you the groups that are investigating that, they're both from the public law enforcement side and the private side are looking at the origination to see if it happened in country, out of country, and if it did happen in country, what state specifically it's coming from.
Is the incident that happened at Temple B'rith Kodesh, Was that a crime?
We go back a long way. I keep using the word disruption. There's a section of the penal law that says if somebody intentionally or recklessly goes into a religious service, a funeral service, and disrupts it, it's a violation of crime. Did I get that right, Chief? So in my opinion, yes, it was, in my opinion, not as a law enforcement officer, it was clear the actions of that individual were premeditated, waited for the start of service, disrupted the start of service, and then because of the security posture that was there, was removed without incident. But yes, and I shared my opinion with the chief that, yes, it was clear the intent was to cause disruption, therefore a crime.
Can you say that these situations are connected at this point?
I would say that they are not connected. I can tell you the number of threats that were received by email, they all seem to be of the same area and origin. So the bomb threats, I believe, are connected, but this individual, at this time, I have no reason to believe that he's involved in it all.
So the email threats likely connected?
My opinion, again, and I'm not really smart when it comes to computers, but I would say yes. Okay? Thank you all for coming, and have a great day.